Hi everybody, Glenn Blackett, lawyer funded by the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. Just giving you a quick update on the Widdowson file. As you may know, on December 2nd, Frances Widdowson was arrested at the University of Victoria for trying to come onto campus and speak. She was issued a trespass notice for $115. The Justice Center is going to fund her defense. I'm providing a little update because there's an interesting news article in the Vic News, December 10th, titled Controversial Activist to Fight $115 trespass ticket after arrest at University of Victoria. What I find interesting about the article is two things. First, the university provides a statement on the affair and says as follows: the university values the free and lawful expression of ideas. We do not limit debate or prohibit the reasonable exercise of freedoms of expression on campus. Don't believe your lying eyes. However, it is imperative that activities on campus take place in a respectful manner, and that, above all else, they are carried out with due regard to the safety and security of people and spaces, including those engaged directly or indirectly. It says, noted a UVic spokesperson. So first thing that's interesting about this article is that quote. And what I find particularly interesting about that quote, other than the fact that it seems to belie what we can all see, which is Frances Widdowson came onto campus to try to engage students in a conversation, and she was arrested and held for 2 hours in prison for doing so. So that doesn't look to me like not limiting debate or prohibiting the reasonable exercise of freedom of expression on campus. That looks like the exact opposite. But what's also interesting is the university says that activities on campus must take place in a respectful manner. And that word respect I see a lot recently. It doesn't mean what it used to mean. It doesn't seem. It seems, if anything, it means, I would say, ideologically compliant. Every time you see some leftist organization that uses the word respect, I think if you just replace that word with instead the term ideologically compliant, then everything's clearly understood. So let's take another run at that sentence. However, it is imperative that activities on campus take place in an ideologically compliant manner. That seems to be exactly what happened on campus, doesn't it? So that's interesting. The other thing that I find interesting is the news article itself goes on in the next paragraph, and it says, Widdowson has been a figure in conservative circles for around a decade, criticizing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, the Black Lives Matter movement, and most recently, and this is the key part, the finding of potential grave sites at former residential schools. So note the wording there, not the finding of grave sites, but the finding of potential grave sites. Well, what does potential mean? Potential means we don't know whether or not there's grave sites there or not, which of course is the whole issue. The whole issue that Frances Widdowson is saying is, there may be grave sites in some locations, there may not be grave sites in some locations, but the very, audacity to suggest that there may not be grave sites where activists tell us there are grave sites is an act of, hate, misinformation, genocide, etc. But isn't it funny that the media who reports on this repeats the same kind of doubt? What's also interesting in a similar vein is the Aboriginal People Television Network, the APTN, recently released a little video called Dismantling Denialism. And I provided a quote online about it. I found it a little frightening, honestly, because if you look at the YouTube sort of screen capture for the video, what you see is, I think, Frances Widdowson and confronted by two patched gang members. So we have organized criminals, apparently, confronting denialism. And this is something we're starting to see more often, is sort of a alignment between groups who make a living of intimidating people and another group who make a living intimidating people, namely leftist activists. In any case, in that video, the APTN Dismantling Denialism, which I think is fair to say propagandistic, not a biased look at the issue, they use another very similar term. What they say in that video is the discovery of what are believed to be unmarked graves. Again, so that's, I think kind of leftist propaganda that itself isn't comfortable saying the discovery of unmarked graves, period, but rather modifies it again with uncertainty. The discovery of what are believed to be unmarked graves. So we have this interesting situation where Frances Widdowson is pointing out that there's doubt. And for pointing that out, she gets arrested effectively and imprisoned, although there are legal excuses for why she was arrested. Well, at the same time, the organizations that report on it, including the APTN, which I think is biased in its reporting, repeat the same exact doubt that she's trying to, point out to Canadians exists, that there does exist, in fact, some doubt about some allegations. How many allegations are false? I don't know. Are 215 children buried in Kamloops? Could be. I rather doubt it. If there were 215 children buried in Kamloops, I would hope that the police would excavate and do an investigation. It seems just impossible to explain that it hasn't. But in any case, what I find interesting about this is that we now have the Assembly of First Nations that wants to criminalize criminalize denialism as a form of hate speech. In other words, these media outlets that express any kind of doubt about the claim that there's 215 children buried there, both the APTN itself and Vic News, apparently those organizations, according to the Assembly of First Nations, should be sent to jail right along with Frances Widdowson because they're not behaving in a respectful manner. Now, are they?